In this video, we will show how to do the questions in Module 1 of the math portion of the SAT practice test number 9. That is published by the College Board. You can find the questions in this video by finding the practice test online. The test is published by the College Board. You can search College Board SAT practice test or paper practice tests on the College Board in some internet browser, or you can go directly to the website on the screen. A link to that website is also in the description of this video. Along with that, I will put a link to the PDF of this practice test in the description of the video as well. If you do go to that website, we're looking at the full-length paper practice test section. And as you scroll down, you'll see that bundles 1, 2, and 3 are no longer there as of, I believe, February of 2025. There are still ways you can get 1, 2, and 3 online, but we're looking at bundle 9. The SAT practice test number 9 is found in bundle 9. The actual test is right here. And if you want, you can find the answers and answer explanations to this practice test in this bundle. The answers to the College Board practice test may be slightly different than the way I solve the problems. Now, once you download the SAT practice test number 9, it will look like this. It starts out with reading and writing modules. And then a ways down, it starts the math modules. There are 2 math modules. Math module number 1 starts on page 30. The first page of the module gives formula and a fact sheet. The second page of the module describes how to format answers. Then the question starts on page 32. So we're going to do module 1 in this video. There'll be a link to the module 2 video in the description of this video as well. Let's start with the questions. So test 9, module 1. Question 1. The lengths of 2 sides of a triangle are 4 centimeters and 6 centimeters. If the perimeter of the triangle is 18 centimeters, what is the length in centimeters of the third side of the triangle? So perimeter of a triangle is all of the sides added up. So A plus B plus C, where those are the sides. We know the perimeter is 18 centimeters. We know one side, we'll call it A, is 4 centimeters, and another side, we'll call it B, is 6 centimeters. And so we're asked to find the C. Well, 4 and 6 add to 10, so we get 18 is equal to 10 plus C. Subtracting 10 from both sides, we get 8 as the third side of the triangle. So 8 is the correct answer. And that is option B. So option B, 8, is the answer to question 1. Question 2. Which equation has the same solution as the given equation? So we're given an equation, 16x plus 30 is equal to 190. We're going to subtract 30 from both sides. We get 16x is equal to 160 when I do that. Notice that all of the equation options are 16x is equal to some number. And therefore, 16x is equal to 160 is the correct equation. So equation C is an equation with the same solution as the given equation. That's also called an equivalent equation. Question 3. Ty set a goal to walk at least 24 kilometers every day to prepare for a multi-day hike. On a certain day, Ty plans to walk at an average speed of 4 kilometers per hour. What is the minimum number of hours Ty must walk on that day to fulfill the daily goal? So the daily goal is to walk 24 kilometers. And we're going to multiply that 24 by something to give me equal an hour's measurement. So what we need to multiply by is basically some type of hours divided by kilometers. And we see here that each 1 hour that Ty walks, he travels for 4 kilometers. So 4 kilometers per hour is that. So take 24 times 1/4 and you end up with 6. And 6 hours is the final answer. Well, technically 6 is the final answer because it says Ty must walk on that day. What is the minimum number of hours? Minimum number of hours is 6. So B is the correct answer to question 3. Question 4. The function g is defined by g of x is equal to x squared plus 9. For which value of x is g of x equal to 25? So we want the output to be equal to 25. So we take x squared plus 9 and set that equal to 25, and we solve. Then we get x squared is equal to 16 when I subtract 9 from both sides. And then to actually solve the question, you'd have to take the positive and negative square roots. The positive square root gives you x is equal to 4. The negative square root gives you x is equal to negative 4. And the only option that's correct is 4. I shouldn't say correct. Both of these options satisfy an x value which you can plug in and get 25. But the only option that we have that matches up is A of 4. So the correct answer for this question is A, or 4. Question 5. Which expression is equivalent to 9x squared plus 5x? This question is asking us to factor out the greatest common factor. If you look at the options that we have listed, those are all factored versions of something. So let's factor out a greatest common factor. 9 and 5 don't have any greatest common factor other than 1. X squared and x have a common factor of x. So I'm going to factor out x, or 1x. And then what's going to be left inside is 9x plus 5. So x times 9x plus 5 is the correct answer. And that is option A. So the answer to question 5 is A, x times the quantity 9x plus 5. Question 6. Each value in the data set shown represents the height in centimeters of a plant. What is the mean height in centimeters of these plants? So we're trying to find the average. And to find the average, we'd add up all those numbers. 6 plus 10 plus 13 plus 2 plus 15 plus 22 plus 10 plus 4 plus 4 plus 4, and then divide that by the number of numerical values in the set. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So we're dividing by 10. And if you do that, we have to add up the top first. When you add the tops, you get 90. 90 divided by 10 is equal to 9. So the answer there is that the average is 9. 9 is the correct answer to question 6. Question 7. A student council group is selling school posters for a fundraiser. They use the function P of X is equal to 5X minus 222 to determine their profit, P of X in dollars, for selling X school posters. In order to earn a profit of $900, how many school posters would they need to sell? So the profit is P of X, and we're asking when is P of X equal to 900? So when is the output of 5X minus 220 equal to 900? So what we would do is we would add 220 to both sides, 1,120 on the left, and then that would give us 5X on the right. So when we add 220 to both sides, we get 1,120 is equal to 5X. Dividing both sides by 5 gives me an X value of 224. So the answer to number 7, how many school posters must they sell, is they must sell 224 posters. So that's it. That's the whole thing. 224 is the answer to question 7. Question 8. Jay walks at a speed of 3 miles per hour and runs at a speed of 5 miles per hour. If he walks for W hours and runs for R hours for a combined total of 14 miles, which equation represents this situation? Now, if you think about this, we're talking about miles per hour. If we multiply that times the number of hours, we're going to get how many miles that Jay walked and ran in each situation. So if he's walking for W hours at 3 miles per hour, then 3W is the number of miles he walks. If he runs for 5 miles per hour, a total of R hours, then the number of miles that he runs is 5 times R. If we combine those, we end up getting the total amount that he walked and ran, which is 14 miles. So the correct equation is 3W plus 5R is equal to 14, which is option A. So the answer to question 8 is A. Question 9. John paid a total of $165 for a microscope by making a down payment of $37 plus P monthly payments of $16 each. Which of the following equations represents this situation? So John put down $37, and then that's added to his monthly payments, which were at $16 times, since he made P monthly payments, that's 16 times P. So you could write that as 37 plus 16P or 16P plus 37. Either way is fine. And in total, he paid $165. So this equation of 16P plus 37 is equal to 165 would be an equation that represents this situation. And if you look at that, that's option C. So option C is the answer to question 9. Question 10. The given equation relates the positive numbers p, x, and y. Which equation correctly expresses y in terms of p and x? So essentially, when we say expresses y, we want to solve this equation for y. So I take y minus 57 equal to px, and I want to solve for y, which means getting y by itself on one side of the equation. All we have to do that is to add 57 to both sides. So adding 57 to the left side gives us y. Adding 57 to the right-hand side gives me px plus 57. So that's the equation which correctly expresses y in terms of p and x. And that is option B. Therefore, the answer to question 10 is B. Question 11. A company opens an account with an initial balance of $36,100. The account earns interest and no additional deposits or withdrawals are made. The account balance is given by an exponential function A, where A of t is the account balance in dollars, t years after the account is opened. The account balance after 13 years is $68,071.93. Which equation could define A? So if A is an exponential function, then the exponential function is going to look like some sort of coefficient, which is an initial amount, we'll call that P, times some rate, which will be 1 plus some rate, raised to the t power. The interest rate is going to be R, and that's going to be just some number. So I'm going to call that just N. Well, we know that the initial amount is going to be 36,100 because that is what it tells me. $36,100 is the initial amount. And then it says after 13 years, we're at $68,071.93. So essentially, we get $68,071.93 when t is 13. Let's put that in parentheses. So obviously we have growth there. So I know that it's going to look like this. And essentially, what I have to do is find the n. Now, you can use logarithms to find the n. You can find the n in some other ways as well. But the easiest way is that really we only have two options for n. It's going to be 1.05 or 0.05. Since we're growing, it actually has to be the 1.05. Because if it was 0.05, then the account would be losing money. So it's got to be 1.05, and therefore the actual equation is this one, $36,100 times 1.05 raised to the t power is equal to the amount, or the amount after times t, to be specific. So the answer to question 11 is A. A is A of t equals 36,100 times 1.05 to the t power. I knew that this was going to be 1.05 rather than 0.05 because 0.05 would be a decay, 1.05 would be growth. You can also confirm that by plugging in this into your calculator, plugging the right-hand side of this equation into your calculator, and seeing that you actually get $68,071.93 when rounding. Question 12. The circle shown has center O, circumference of 144 pi, and diameters PR and QS. The length of the arc PS is twice the length of the arc PQ. What is the length of QR? Since these two lines are diameters, they're going to split the circle up into halves each way. And what we're saying here, with the length of PS being twice the length of PQ, if I call the arc length from P to Q, if I call that X, then from S to P or from P to S, that's going to be 2X. Because these diameters cut the circle in half, then I know that the same ratios are going to be here. So across from X, from R to S is going to be an X length. That's the arc length here. And from Q to P, Q to R or R to Q, that's another 2X. So this is the picture. We have X, X, 2X, 2X. And so we know that the circumference, in terms of X, when I add all these up, the circumference is going to be 6 times X. Now we also know that the circumference is 144 pi as well. So that means each X is going to be 144 divided by 6 times pi. In other words, 24 times pi. Now be careful here because we're not asked to find just X. We're asked to find the length of Q to R. Q to R is not X, but rather 2X. So because QR is 2X, we're going to have to multiply that number by 2. I got to take off the drawings there to do that. So the length from Q to R is equal to 2X, which is equal to 2 times 24 pi, which is obviously 48 pi. So 48 pi is the correct answer, which is option B. So 48 pi is the correct answer. Key there is saying that Q to R is 2X rather than X. So B is the answer. Question 13. The solution to the given system of equations is x comma y. What is the value of x? In this case, we're going to use substitution to solve this. So what we're going to do, since we have y equals negative 2x in the first equation, is that we're going to take our second equation, 3x plus y equals 40, and we're going to substitute out the y in that equation with a negative 2x. On the left-hand side, when we combine like terms, we just get x. And on the right-hand side, we get 40. Now, if you wanted to, you could also find the value of y by plugging in 40 in for x and solving for y. Y, it turns out, would be negative 2 times 40 is negative 80. But it doesn't ask for that. This question, question 13, only asks for the value of x. And so now we know that the value of x is 40 if the solution to the system of equations is x comma y. So x is 40, and that's all we need. Question 14. The frequency table summarizes 57 data values in the data set. What is the maximum data value in the data set? So the values are right here, and the frequencies show how often they get repeated. So 6 got repeated 3 times, 7 got repeated 3 times, 8 got repeated 8 times, and so on and so forth. But it's just asking us for the maximum data value. So we just need to find the maximum data value where it occurred at least once. The maximum value where it occurred at least once is 14. 14 occurred 6 times, and therefore the maximum data value is 14 in this data set. Question 15. One leg of a right triangle has a length of 43.2 millimeters. The hypotenuse of the triangle has a length of 196.8 millimeters. What is the length of the other leg of the triangle in millimeters? Now, when we do this, what we want to do is use the fact that right triangles obey the Pythagorean theorem. And the Pythagorean theorem says on a right triangle, the square of the two legs added together gives us the square of the hypotenuse. If you forget that, it's actually on the formula and fact sheet on page 30 of the practice test. So it's one of those formulas on the fact sheet of the practice test. So in this case, A is 43.2. That's one leg of, you could have also called that B. Doesn't really matter which leg you call it. And then we have another leg, which we don't know. And then we have the length of the hypotenuse, which is 196.8. So the B squared is going to be obtained by taking 196.8 squared and then subtracting 43.2 squared. That's what I get when I subtract 43.2 squared from both sides. When you do that calculation, we get B squared is equal to 36,864. Since we're talking about the lengths have to be in positive values. So I can just take the positive square root of both sides. And if I take the positive square root of both sides, I end up with 192. So the length of the other leg of the triangle is 192 millimeters. So option C is the correct answer to question 15. Question 16. A wire with a length of 106 inches is cut into two parts. One part has length X inches and the other part has length Y inches. The value of X is 6 more than 4 times the value of Y. So we have a couple of different equations. First off, since the wire is cut into two parts, the two parts have to add to give you 106. The other component is one part has length X inches, the other part has length Y. That tells me X plus Y is 106. The other part is the value of X is 6 more. So the value of X is 6 more means we're going to add 6 to something. 4 times the value of Y. And then what is the value of X? So what we're going to do is we're going to use substitution once again. I'm going to replace the X in this first equation with a 4Y plus 6. Let's go ahead and do that. So we have X plus Y equals 106. And then I replace this X with a 4Y plus 6. And then I'm going to solve this equation. When I do that, I end up with 4Y plus Y as 5Y plus 6 is equal to 106. Subtracting 6 from both sides gives me 5Y equals 100. Dividing both sides by 5 gives me Y is equal to 20. Now, y is equal to 20, but that is not the answer to this question. This is saying, what is the value of x? Since y is equal to 20, I can find x using either of these two equations. If you wanted to use that left-hand equation, you would take x plus 20 equals 106, and then solve that. Obviously, in that case, x is equal to 86. On the other hand, you could have taken the other equation, which says x equals 4 times y plus 6, and simplified that. So in both cases, you end up with an x value of 86. Doesn't matter which equation you use, whether you use this one or this one, but once you know y is equal to 20, plug it in, find x. X is equal to 86, and so that's the answer to question 16. So D is the correct answer to question 16. Option D. Question 17. The function f is given. Which table of values represents y equals f of x minus 3, where the minus 3 is outside the f of x? Now you'll notice that for each case, we're plugging in the same x values. We plug in a -6, a -5, and a 4. Plug in a -6, a -5, and a 4. Plug in a -6, a -5, and a 4. And the reason they're having you do that is because when you plug those numbers in, well, let's actually do this. We have f of x is equal to x plus 6 times x plus 5 times x minus 4. Okay, plus 6 plus 5 minus 4. So when you plug in, for instance, -6, what's going to happen is that this term, x plus 6, becomes a 0. And anything times 0 gives you a 0. So f of -6 is going to be 0. That's going to be the same thing if you plug in a -5. So f of -5 is also 0. And that's not because of this term, but rather the second term. When you plug in -5, your second term becomes 0. 0 times anything is 0. And that's going to be the same thing with the third term and 4. So when we plug in 4, we also end up with 0. So when you plug in -6, -5, or 4 into your function f, you get 0. Now notice that we're asking for which table of values give you f of x minus 3. So what would happen if I took this exact same equation, whoops. So what would happen if I took that exact same equation and just subtracted 3 from all of the outputs? I'd have to take 0 minus 3, which is just -3. And therefore, whatever table this is, when I have put in an x of -6, it should give me a -3. When I put in an x of -5, it should give me a -3. When I put in an x of 4, it should give me a -3. The only table that does that is table B, so that is the correct answer. B, the table B, is the one which gives the values of f of x minus 3. So 17 has an answer of B. Question 18. A landscaper uses a hose that puts 88 times x ounces of water in a bucket in 5 times y minutes. What is the expression to represent the number of ounces of water the hose puts in the bucket in 9 times y minutes at this rate? So think about this. If we have a steady rate, our rate would be essentially 88x ounces of water in 5y minutes. And we're asking for what, so this is going to be an unknown number, we'll call it n, number of ounces of water the hose will put in the bucket in 9 times y minutes. So all we have to do here is solve for n, basically. How many ounces of water are going to be put in 9y minutes? This is a proportion question where the rates are set equal. Now, if you do this, we'd multiply 9y on both sides. Basically, what we would end up with is 88 times x times 9. When you take 88 times 9, you get 792. So that's when you take 88x times 9y, you get 792x times y, equal to n ounces times 5y. And there we go. Remember, the goal here is to solve for n, figure out what this n number is. So what we're going to do is we're going to take 792 times xy and divide that by 5y. That'll give us our n. And as you can see, the y's will cancel out. And so we'll get 792x divided by 5 as the number of ounces of water that we will put in 9y minutes. So that's the answer D. 792 times x divided by 5 is going to be the number of ounces of water the hose puts in the bucket in 9y minutes. So 792x over 5 is the correct answer to this problem. Question 19. We have two equations. It says in the given system of equations, h is a constant. If the system has no solution, what is the value of h? What I need to know is that no solution means parallel lines. Parallel lines are ones with the same slope and different y-intercepts. So what I would do is I'd start with that first line, 4x minus 9y is equal to 9y plus 5. And I'd find the slope by converting it into slope-intercept form. The way I would do that is I would subtract 4x from both sides and then also subtract 9y from both sides. If I subtract 4x from both sides, I get negative 9y is equal to 9y minus 4x plus 5. And then I'm going to subtract 9y from both sides to get rid of this 9y on the right-hand side. When you subtract 9y from both sides, you get negative 18y is equal to negative 4x plus 5. Putting this into slope-intercept form now, just means that I divide both sides by a negative 18. So I get a positive 4 over 18 times x minus 5 over 18 as the equation of that first line. So that's the first line. And as we can see, the slope of that line is 4 over 18. Now let's look at the second line. The second line is hy equals 2 plus 4x. I'm going to write this as 4x plus 2 because that's closer to slope-intercept form, and it doesn't matter which order we have. If I'm looking for the slope of this line, it is going to be 4 over h multiplied times x plus 2. So the slope here is 4 over h. Since parallel lines need to have the same slope, and in order to have no solution to the given system of equations, I need parallel lines. I need these two slopes to be equal. And if you can't see it yet, h has to be 18. If you want to do the actual calculations, just set those slopes equal and solve, multiply both sides by h, multiply both sides by 18, and you would end up with 14 times 4 times h on one side equals 18 times 4 on the other. And then divide both sides by 4, you get h is equal to 18. So I'm not going to go through that. I'm not going to write all those steps because it's very obvious that to have the same slope, h has to be 18. So h is 18, and that's the final answer to question 19. So answer D is the correct option for question 19. Question 20. 13 is p% of 25. What is the value of p? So 13 is going to be some percentage. I'm going to write that as a rate multiplied times 25. I write that as r rather than p because when I write it in an equation like this, it's going to turn out to be a decimal when I solve for r. So taking 13, dividing by 25 gives me 0.52 as my rate. Now, as a percentage, that is 52%. So the value of P is equal to 52. Therefore, the answer to question 20 is 52. Question 21. What is the smallest solution to the given equation? There's a number of ways to solve this given equation, but I'll show you one of the ways to do that. The first thing I'm going to do is, since each side is underneath a positive square root, I'm going to square both sides. When I do that, I end up with x minus 2 quantity squared is equal to 3x plus 34. Then what I would do is square that left-hand side. X minus 2 squared is like x minus 2 times another copy of x minus 2. On the left-hand side, I'd get x squared minus 2x minus another 2x plus 4 is equal to 3x plus 34. Now I'm going to do a couple of things at the same time. I'm going to combine this minus 2x and minus 2x. That gives me a minus 4x. And then I'm going to move the 3x over. I'm going to subtract 3x from both sides, and I'm going to subtract 34 from both sides so that one side of that equation is 0. When I subtract 3x from both sides, I get x squared minus 7x. When I subtract 34, I get minus 30 on the left-hand side. If I subtract 3x and then subtract 34 on the right-hand side, I get a 0 on the right-hand side. Now, the reason I wanted this as a quadratic equal to 0 was because I was hoping that this trinomial factors into two linear binomials. And sure enough, it does, because if you look at the numbers that multiply to give you negative 30, but add up to give you a negative 7, you could take those numbers as negative 10 and positive 3. Therefore, x squared minus 7x minus 30 factors into x minus 10 times x plus 3. Using the 0 factor property, we get x minus 10 is equal to 0, or x plus 3 is equal to 0. So we have two options for answers. X equals 10 is one answer. That's what I get when I add 10 to both sides. X equals negative 3 is the other answer. Question 21 asks for the smallest solution to this given equation. The smallest solution is the negative 3. And that is going to be my final answer. Negative 3 is the smallest solution to this equation. You can always check that for yourself by plugging in negative 3 on the left, negative 3 on the right, and seeing that we get the exact same outputs. So negative 3 is the answer to question 21. Question 22, function f is defined by f of x is equal to x plus 6 times x plus 5 times x plus 1. Function g is defined by g of x is equal to f of, in parentheses, x minus 1. The graph of y equals g of x in the xy plane has x-intercepts of a0, b0, and c0, where a, b, and c are distinct constants. What is the value of a plus b plus c? Again, there's harder and easier ways to do this. We have g of x is equal to f of x minus 1. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my f of x and replace each x with an x minus 1. You can do that in parentheses, or technically you don't need the parentheses if you don't want to. So I take that function, and x plus 6 is going to become x minus 1 plus 6. X plus 5 is going to be x minus 1 plus 5. And x plus 1 is going to be x minus 1 plus 1. So that means g of x is actually equal to x plus 5 times x plus 4 times x plus 0, or just x. The x-intercepts are going to be where this function has an output of 0. So where this function has an output of 0, well, that is going to be whenever the x values are such that I get 0. We can use the zero factor property and say if x plus 5 is equal to 0, then x has to be negative 5. If x plus 4 is 0, then x has to be negative 4. If x is equal to 0, then x has to be 0. So I have 3 options. And these are going to be the A, the B, and the C of my x-intercepts. We're going to have 3 x-intercepts. They're going to be negative 5, 0, negative 4, 0, and 0, 0. And therefore, the A plus B plus C is just negative 5 plus negative 4 plus 0, which gives me negative 9. And that is my final answer. Negative 9 is the correct answer to problem 22. And as we can see, that's option B. So B is the answer to question 22. Question 23. For x greater than 0, the function f is defined as follows. F of x equals 201% of x. So f of x is equal to 201% of x, written as an equation would be 2.01 times x. So we're not growing by 201% every time. That would be a different type of scenario. We're multiplying by 2.1 every single time, 2.01. So take whatever x value you have, plug it in, you take 2.01 times x, and that gives you your output. In this case, this is a linear function because we have x, something times x to the first power. So since we have this x to the first power, it's linear. Since the coefficient of x is positive, that means the slope is positive, so it's an increasing function. So this is an increasing linear function, and that's all it's asking us for. So the answer to question 23 is D. Increasing linear. Question 24. The function g is defined by g of x is equal to f of x plus 5. For what value of x does g of x reach its minimum? If you wanted to, you could replace all of these x's with x plus 5 and then simplify if you'd like. I'm actually going to do it a different way. This, I notice, is a quadratic equation. Moreover, it has a positive coefficient on the x squared. So I know that I'm getting a parabola here that is pointing up, which means the minimum value of this function is going to happen at the vertex of that parabola. And that's what we're going to do. So we're going to find the value of x for the vertex of this parabola. Now, f is going to be a parabola. G is also going to be a parabola because when you replace x with an x plus 5, you're replacing a linear with a linear. You're also going to get a parabola. In fact, you're going to get a parabola that's been shifted to the left 5 units. So from f. So what we're going to do is we're going to find the vertex of the function f first, and then we're going to shift that over 5 units, and then we'll know what the vertex of G is. So the vertex of F has an x value of opposite of B over 2A, because when you're dealing with a quadratic, right in the middle of your two zeros, we're going to get a vertex. So it happens at opposite of B over 2A. That's a formula for the x value of a vertex of a quadratic function. In our case, the B is 64 and the A is 4. So we get negative 64 divided by 2 times 4. That's a negative 8. So we know that the vertex of F is going to have x value of negative 8. So think of the vertex of F as being a point whose x value is 8. And I don't know what the y value is, but we can find the y value if we like. I don't need to. What we can do now is say that g of x is f of x shifted left 5 units. That's just what the shift is. We replace the x with an x plus 5. That's a left shift of 5 units. Knowing this, we know that the vertex of G is going to be this point shifted left 5 units. If I do that, I end up at the point negative 13 comma some value of y. And that's going to be, that negative 13 is going to be the x value for which g of x reaches its minimum. So for what x value does g of x reach its minimum? Well, g of x reaches its minimum at x equals negative 13. Again, if you wanted to, you could replace all these x's up here with x plus 5s, but it's more work than we really need to deal with. So x equals negative 13 is the answer to question 24. I forgot to mention that's option A. So option A is the correct answer to question 24. Question 25. Let me clear my drawing. There we go. 1 gallon of stain will cover 170 square feet of a surface. A yard has a total fence area of W square feet. Which equation represents the total amount of stain, S in gallons, needed to stain the fence in this yard twice? Now, the twice is a very big word there. So if we were just doing it once, we would have to cover 170 square feet. If we're doing it twice, well, we have to, or excuse me, if we're doing it once, it's W square feet for the fence area. If we're doing it twice, it's 2W square feet for the fence area. So what I would do is say we want to paint 2W square feet. And we know that 1 gallon, 2W, we'll call that square feet. 1 gallon covers approximately 170 square feet. So we're getting that the total number of gallons that I need, because the square feet are going to cancel, total number of gallons that I need is going to be 2W divided by 170. And 2W divided by 170 is the same thing as W divided by 85. So when I create the equation, my equation is going to be that the number of gallons I need is going to be W over 85. And that's option D. So the answer to question 25 is D, W over 85. '26. The table shows the results of a poll. A total of 803 voters are selected at random, and they're asked which candidate they would vote for in an upcoming election. According to the poll, if 6,424 people vote in the election, by how many votes would Angel Cruz win or be expected to win? So we're saying if this poll is right, then Angel Cruz, sorry. So let me start there again. If this poll is right, then the number of votes for Cruz should be the proportion of what we think Cruz should get. Based on this poll, Cruz should get 483 out of every 803 votes. And then I'm going to multiply that times the total number of people voting. That's 6,424. When I do that calculation, I end up with 3,864 as how many votes Cruz should get. Smith votes. Well, we'll take the proportion of Smith votes, that's 320 out of 803. And we'll multiply that times the total number of people who are expected to vote, 6,424, 6,424. When you do that multiplication, you get 2,560. And then we're going to say, how many votes would Angel Cruz be expected to win? By how many votes? Well, that's asking for the difference. So we're going to subtract, and we would say Cruz has 3864 minus 2560. That should be 1304 more votes. So 1,304 is the final answer. And that is answer B. So the correct answer to 26 is B. '27. Right rectangular prism X is similar to right rectangular prism Y. The surface area of the right rectangular prism X is 58 centimeters squared, or square centimeters. And the surface area of right rectangular prism Y is 1,450 square centimeters. The volume of the right rectangular prism is 1,250 cubic centimeters. What is the sum of volumes in cubic centimeters of the right rectangular prism X and the right rectangular prism Y? So what we're going to do is notice that, first off, the surface area of X is equal to 58 centimeters squared. Surface area of y is equal to 1,450 centimeters squared. Now, this is in surface area, and I want to talk about the ratio of lengths of the sides versus the ratio of the area versus the ratio of the volume. Let me give a diagram to illustrate my point here. So here's the picture. The ratio of this small filled in yellow square to the larger square. Well, if we're talking about the side length ratio, the side lengths are in a 1:4 ratio, but the area is in a 1:16 ratio. Notice that 16 is 4 squared. And the same thing would hold true if we were talking about volume. If I did a volume and the side lengths were in a 1:4 ratio, then the volume would be in a 1:4 cubed ratio. 4 cubed, by the way, is 64. So if we're looking at the ratio of the surface area, what we have there is 1450 divided by 58. That's going to be in square centimeters divided by squared centimeters. That's going to be 25. Because these figures are similar, then the ratio of each side of the figure is not going to be 25, but rather the square root of 25, which is 5. And lastly, that means the ratio of the volume of the figure is going to be 5 cubed, which is 125. So the ratio of the volumes of the figure is going to be 125, since the ratio of the surface area is 25. Area is in squared centimeters, side lengths are in centimeters, volumes are in cubic centimeters. Hopefully that makes sense. So since we know that the volume of y is 1,250 cubic centimeters, and we know that x is the smaller figure, that means the volume of x compared to the volume of y, well, x is going to be multiplied times 125 to give me the volume of y. So the volume of x times 125 is the volume of y. And we know that the volume of y from the problem at hand is 1,250. It just tells me that. So 125 times the volume of x is equal to 1,250. Dividing by 125 on both sides gives me that the volume of x is equal to 10. Now be careful, this question is not asking me for a final answer, which is the volume of X. It says, what is the sum of the volumes in cubic centimeters of right rectangular prism X and right rectangular prism Y? So the sum of the volumes of Y and X. So the answer is going to be the volume of X, let me put that in parentheses, plus the volume of Y, which in this case is going to be 10 plus 1,250, which summing those up, you get 1,260. That would be in cubic centimeters. Again, this is because ratios of similar figures are nice, but when you talk about area, the ratio is in squared centimeters, so we're talking about things squared. Side length would be in centimeters. The ratio is not in centimeters, but the length itself is in centimeters, so it's just raised to the first power. And then volumes are cubic centimeters, that's raised to the third power. So 1,260 cubic centimeters is what we have. Now, by the way, we did this for right rectangular prisms. We didn't actually have to use the fact that this was a right rectangular prism. Just knowing ratios of surface area and lengths and volumes would have caused us to get here. But if you wanted to, you could look up right rectangular prisms and some formulas on right rectangular prisms in the formula and fact sheet on Module 1. That's page 30. So that is it for this test, Module 1. So this concludes Module 1 of the SAT practice test number 9. There'll be a link to the explanation of the solutions of Module 2 of this practice test in the description of this video. Also, if you want solutions to other SAT practice tests other than 9, there's a link to a playlist of the other math portions of the SAT practice tests as well. If you are planning on taking the SAT practice test soon, good luck. Or if you're taking the actual SAT test soon, good luck. I hope this video helps you out.